Welcome to the Dr. Leadership Podcast, where the DR stands for Driving Results. Our focus is weekly conversations around life and business relationships and the important leadership qualities for both. These concepts and qualities will help you drive positive results in both your business and personal lives. A weekly connection point to help business leaders develop individual contributors, managers, and executives on your teams. We also will tie in concepts around family focus and life lessons to help you drive success in your personal life. Welcome to the Dr. Leadership Show. Let's get after it. Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Dr. Leadership Podcast. Thanks for joining in. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Hey, quick reminders, give us any feedback from prior episodes or anything you like or dislike about today. Feel free to reach out at our email at drleadershipresults@gmail.com. Or at gmail.com. And then also remember to check out the website, www.drleadershipresults.com. We would love to have you join our subscription site. Had a few more people rumble into the membership site this week. Thank you very much for joining. And want to dive in today a little more business focused. Personal life, you can kind of take a few things off of this, but I want to talk about big game hunting. And what I mean by big game hunting is going after large transactions, big organizations, big companies that can make significant impact in your business life. So if you're an individual contributor, bringing down the big deal, bringing down the whale. If you're a leader, how you get your team comfortable engaging and going after large transactions, calling on the biggest organizations in your turf, whether you're a service company, whether you're a widget seller, a manufacturer, whatever it might be. How do you go about going after the monsters, and how do you successfully engage in this? And it's going to take a couple episodes to get through this, but today I want to talk about, how do you get after it and get started? And the first thing is to remember this. Those companies are no different than the ma and pa on the corner. The decision makers, the leaders, are no different than you and me. They go to church, they walk into the grocery store, they get their car's oil changed at Jiffy Lube or at the Firestone station. They're just people. These people have worked through the years inside the organizations to develop their skill sets and to be promoted up through the organizations, but don't be intimidated on that. And I figured this out really when I was about 23, 24, hell no, I was a year older. I was 25 years old. I was very, very fortunate. What really kind of launched my career in the business I'm in, which at that point I was a copier sales guy. Let's face it, sold copy machines, fax machines, mailing equipment, etc. Super sexy. Had my own van to deliver my equipment, etc. And I had a really good year, and my territory was expanded. And I had some very nice local businesses, a couple of regional banks and some manufacturing people on the ticket. Well, I'd gone down to a town called Pella, Iowa. And Pella at one point was known as more millionaires per capita than any other town in the United States. It's a very interesting Dutch heritage. They have the Tulip Festival every spring, which is absolutely beautiful. They have an unbelievable golf course down there that the local communities went together on called Boss Landon. There's two major organizations in this town of 20,000 people, whatever it is. And one is Pella Corporation, formerly known as Rollscreen, and the other one is Vermeer. And Vermeer are the bright yellow items you see on construction sites along the side of the road, putting the gas lines in the ditches and underneath roads, etc. Big implement equipment, some farm implement equipment, some utility implement equipment and such. Basically, 80% of the town worked at one of those two plants, couple thousand people at each location. And actually, the two families married into one another 35, 40 years ago, so that family's doing pretty well. But Pella Windows, I think everyone kind of recognizes, is one of the leading window manufacturers in the world. And they are around the world. You can get those windows in the European markets. They're certainly all over the United States. And my territory had gotten expanded, and Pella Windows was in the territory. And how it all started is I kind of sat in the parking lot and thought, okay, I guess I got to go in to start this. So I grabbed a business card. And back in this day, there was no email. There was no, the internet was at its infancy. This is when you were getting your AOL.com offers in the mail. Hey, 50 hours of free online dial-up service, right? Coming on CDs in the mail. None of you under the age of 50 even understand what I'm saying right now. But let's put it this way. The amount of data you could get on your computer from the internet was measured in hours to load a photograph up, right? You could get simple documents transmitted. So there was no real way to communicate to this organization other than the long-time useful approach of walk in and ask, hey, who's responsible for your office equipment is how it started. So was very fortunate to start an engagement there. And the reason I'm going to talk about a couple of the deals that I have myself been involved with is to just give you some personal reflection on it, to give you some validity on what I'm saying. I'm not just sitting back here in a position now, 34 years later, 33 years later, as somebody that's in charge of a lot of this stuff for my organization, saying it's easy, just go do it. I understand what it takes to do it. I carried the bag. And what it took at Pella Corporation was 62 appointments over 2.5 years to get this person to become a customer of mine. So it takes some due diligence, and it takes some commitment to the long haul. When you're going big game hunting, they don't change quickly. They don't move on with someone that they don't recognize or trust quickly. You have to build credibility. This company had been a Xerox customer for over 30 years. And Xerox was the monster in the room, the gorilla in the room, right, for years and years and years. It's a very conservative organization. I talked about Pella being the top millionaires per capita in the country at this point. I never wrote or financed a piece of solution or a piece of equipment in Pella in 4 additional years of calling down there as an individual contributor. I brought back $100 bills in envelopes from every transaction I ever did, or a check. And they didn't use cashier's checks. Their personal checks were good. There were many times driving back, $30,000, $40,000 in hundreds in my briefcase thinking, man, I could just kind of, check on out of here and go have a pretty good time. So it is a very conservative, fiscally, emotionally conservative, also very, very traditional in their thinking. And it took that 2 years to build the relationship. And I focused to the problems I could fix and how I would do it different. The reason it took so many different appointments is that I had to chip away at 30 years worth of relationship here, 30 years worth of trust that had been built on the other side. But after a few meetings, because I was passionate, I think young, they started to, and gentleman's name was Jim. I'm going to call him Jim Z. It was a very Danish name, but just to protect the innocent here. Calling on Jim, he ran their entire print center. They had printing presses. They had big paper needs. This is a factory that employs, 2,000-3,000 people. It covers, 75 to 100 acres, big monster buildings where they're producing these monster windows and doors and things. And he had said to me about maybe 8 or 10 meetings in, because I was just introducing the company, right? I'd come down with some documents, a brochure that had been made on my organization, try and tell them, hey, we're local, we're privately held, we're very responsive, you'd be a big fish in a little pond, those types of things. And I'll never forget, he said, Xerox, and insert whoever your big behemoth competitor is, or someone that's been in the industry forever, right? It'd be like Tesla trying to get in the car business and going up against Ford or going up against GM. It's like a regional airline trying to take on United Airlines or something of that nature. But he said, Xerox was the safe route. And I'll never forget, I was quick on my feet. And this had been heard then later on in my career. I hadn't actually penned it, but I'd come up with it on the fly. He says, you're right. No one gets fired for buying Xerox. And he kind of smiled and he laughed. And I said, the other thing that never happens when you buy Xerox? And he said, what's that? I said, no one that buys Xerox gets promoted for managing to the status quo either. You aren't a change agent. And he kind of sat back and a smile came across his face. And I think he probably thought that's pretty ballsy from a 25-year-old kid, right? But I'd kind of taken the underdog position and had challenged him to just hear me out. And that's the key on these things for all of you, is just engage with these people, these monsters, these big game accounts. Let's face it here, I manage our strategic account organization, one of my many responsibilities, but it's the top 1,600 accounts in the U.S. It's the largest financial institutions, the largest insurance institutions, the largest retailers, largest manufacturers, largest healthcare providers, insurance. The list goes on and on and on. It's every name that you see on the Dow Index. It's every name that you see on the NASDAQ. It's every name that you see in the S&P. And they're all just people. So whatever you are doing for a business, just remember, don't be intimidated. Just act like they're people and they'll give you the respect needed. It's kind of like sometimes, and I don't want to compare them to the stars because I'm not a Hollywood guy. Don't have a lot of appreciation for that. But one thing that's consistent from people that are good Hollywood people, like Keanu Reeves is a very, very grounded person. He engages with people when they treat him like he's just a normal guy, right? They are always held at arm's length from people because people think they're so special, or though I can't approach them. And they really like it when you do, because they're like, I'm just Keanu, or I'm just Bill, or I'm just Brent, or I'm just Sue. And it really resonates with them. So don't be fearful to lean in on them. Pella was a great example for me. It took 62 appointments, then wrote the largest deal at that time the company I was with had ever written. 17 big monster systems, replaced these Xerox systems. Then 6 months go by, and, not 6 months, about 3.5 years go by, and I grow that relationship to about half of their equipment is now mine. Now, they have all these different factory levels. They had locations in the Midwest. They had locations in Eastern U.S., different plants. So it was taking a while to get there. And I was recruited and I became a leader with the company I'm with now. And after my non-compete expired, I went down and started engaging on the next set of equipment that needed to be done. And this is why I talk about how you have to go about solving their problems. And I'll get to the rest of that story here in just a few minutes, because it really, really was a situation where you have to give them a reason why they make a change. You have to put it in a position where you're solving problems, right? The other large deals, the largest mortgage provider in the country, huge software win there. They were more broken than any of the small companies. I think what people also think when they look at a large organization is they've got it all figured out. I'm not going to be able to go in there and tell them how to fix something. They've got it all figured out. It's typically just the opposite. What my experience has shown me is that these big companies are rather broken in all of their approaches to business. They're trying to figure it out, and they're so big, it's tough for them to figure it out. A lot of times, organizations get big through acquisitions and mergers. And what happens is they have disparate systems then. They have disparate approaches, legacy things that they've done in different lines of business that causes a whole lot of confusion internally in a fray. So they are broken. You can go in and fix them. They're all the same. They're just people. Go in, find commonality, start with the engagement, get them to see you, get them to talk to you. And then what I've always found is get to know somebody that's in that influencer, or decision-making role with a personal relationship, a personal connection. Look at how they network and who's in their network. You have wonderful tools today. Think of LinkedIn. You can see immediately who the person is you need to go see, And then you have the levels of second, third, fourth level relationship that separates you. A customer has that is a personal relationship of yours, has a relationship with somebody that has a relationship with them. Well, you can kind of look and do the due diligence to see, how do I make some connections here with them? You can also look people up on social media, see what their hobbies are. A lot of people, most people love talking about themselves and love putting themselves out there. So you can see that they've got young kids in sports. You can see that they love car racing. They love travel. They post pictures about the beach all the time. You can go in and you can find common ways in which to start to build that relationship. You find the connection and you use that emotional connection to build trust. So then they start to see you as viable because you've built some credibility, because in their mind, you're like them. So the trust starts to build naturally. And you continue to show them over and over again how to open their mind up to you as a different vendor. And the reason people open their minds typically is complacency has infiltrated their current provider. And what I mean by this is, let's talk about the Pella Windows deal for me for a minute. Xerox had been their provider for 30 years. They thought they were going to be the provider for the next 30 years. They took Pella Windows for granted. You don't take anybody for granted that's a customer of yours, especially a big customer. Can take you years to win them and seconds to lose them. What if a new decision maker comes in? Let's say you've won the Pella Windows, and this happened to me. Jim Z left the organization, was actually let go in a downsizing, and an older gentleman by the name of Phil took over. And I immediately had to start the process kind of all over. Phil became like a father figure to me. Phil had a great sense of humor, and I use humor a lot. I think we've talked about how to use humor, self-deprecating humor, self-deprecating. That's funny, self-deprecating humor to build relationships. Phil got a kick out of me, and that was how I utilized that. But you can't be complacent because someone's going to change. Someone's going to be promoted in these big companies. They don't keep them in the positions long so that vendor relationships don't get too tight. The current provider begins to drop the customer service levels. And if you are engaged during that time, timing is a lot of this. You got to be sitting back. You got to be in the right spot. You got to be in the room and talking with them. But when that complacency and that customer service level and something happens, a new decision maker comes in, doesn't like something, wants to be a change agent, you have to be the one that is telling them what good looks like today. You have to have been showing them that you are better than what they have now. You may have to lose one to win one. I have a perfect example about that. Got a great big service provider. All of your credit cards that you get sent to you when you sign up for a new credit card, your updated one comes, you lose one, all that's coming from a big organization down in the Southeast. And 6 years ago, very engaged in calling on him, had a great relationship with the one of the senior decision makers, had him out to our facility in Boulder, wined and dined, really had a good relationship with him. Really thought we were in a good spot. It was a multi-million-dollar opportunity. And it was almost the reverse of me taking Xerox out. A big player in that side of the industry, continuous feed side of the industry, inkjet world, is HP. And it's a very, very well-known name, right? The safe bet. They decided to go with HP. And it was devastating to me because I really thought we had this thing figured out. But we abided by our time, and the rep on my team and the leader on my team that handles that account just kept picking away at it. Sold him stuff that wasn't the big stuff. Handled a couple of weird projects for him. Sold them solutions and things that made a difference to their organization. And suddenly, you know what happened? HP wasn't doing a really good job in services. Great company. Not saying anything bad about HP here. Never talk bad about your competition. Point out differences and tell how you would handle things differently, but don't badmouth your competition. It's a death nail. Do not do that. Talk about your own company. Give comparisons without pointing out directly you're giving comparisons. Talk about what good looks like. You know that your competition doesn't do X, Y, or Z. You don't have to say they suck. You can say one of the things we have found is really beneficial to our customers for long-term customer satisfaction is ABC. You know that the other company isn't providing ABC. You didn't have to say, so-and-so sucks. You just brought it up for them to think. They'll connect the dots. So now, this company that's a big service provider down the Southeast, it's 5 years later. We're talking about another product. We have them back out in Boulder. We've released a smaller product that's not anything to do with the big deal we lost. And the big decision maker decides to come again. So I load myself back up on the plane and I go out to Boulder. We're sitting there and we're talking about the new product, and over across this large room we have at our Customer Innovation Center are our latest inkjet systems. And he goes, I'd like to talk to you about inkjet again a little bit. And we all were kind of like, interesting. Because when you place these, they typically last 10, 12 years. This is 5 years. We go over and start looking at it, and he starts opening up a little bit. You guys really have been good to us. You guys really have been there for us and helped us solve some problems. And then he said this, I think we made a mistake selecting HP. I said, why is that? And he goes, service hasn't been what they said. We've had some issues. And then he told me this story. And this is complacency, right? He says, I haven't seen the leadership inside that organization since we placed the equipment. And I went, whoa, okay. That's a sign to me. Don't ever not stay engaged, right? So we talk to him about the products. We show him. We do some sample sets. We have him out again. The decision maker didn't come, but his folks, his operators and his managers came out, and we are gaining traction. We can tell. And they tell us a story. HP gets word that they're sniffing at us, and they're coming to us to make a change. And guess what happens? Leadership from the other organization, HP in this example, decides to pay a visit to him down on the floor, down in the Southeast. And the decision maker's in the meeting. And he's a no-nonsense guy, good friend now. Consider him a very good friend. And his comment to the VP was, after the VP went on and on about a whole lot of things that they're going to do, and his comment back to him was, great to hear. Where the hell you been the last 48 months? Right in his face. This is all about complacency. Do not take people for granted. Once you've won, the customer service has to continue to escalate to be a big game hunter and a successful retainer of those relationships. You have to make sure that you stay on top of your game because everyone is going to try to take you out. How you win is by doing non-complacent things, by doing all the right things, and how you hold them as you continue that process. The current provider just forgot all about them. Another way to get engagement with a prospect is to ask for their biggest problem. I've used this a number of times. Successful people on my team use it all the time. You go in and someone says, we're very happy with our current widget maker, our current service provider, whatever it is. And you go, is there anything that's just really causing your company strife? And they'll go, well, we've got this terrible problem. We just can't, nobody can resolve it. Give me a shot. You may not be able to fix it, but lean in to the thing that's keeping them up at night, and that will build a relationship for you. You aren't asking for an easy one. Give me your hardest problem. If I can resolve your hardest problem, will you give me serious consideration on other aspects of your business? Well, the answer is a resounding yes. Who's going to say no to that? Ask for their biggest problem. Concentrate on solving that. And now, I said earlier, I'm going to go back to the Pella Windows story here for a second because there's a second chapter. Sold it, first big units, biggest deal the company had ever had. I move on, update some other equipment. I get asked to come over to my current provider, my current employer, to come into leadership. I wait for my non-compete to expire. I go down and I start calling on Pella Corporation again. Phil, the old gentleman's still there. Glad to see you. How come you weren't down here? Well, I told him I'd take another opportunity. Good to see you. I want to talk to you about my current provider, or my current employer, who I'm working for now. And he goes, actually, we have another big set of equipment. It's out in the engineering offices on the production floors. So this is the engineers that were designing the window apparatuses, designing the construction, designing the gear ratios on the handles for casement windows in and out, designing low E and argon-filled gas systems between the window panes to make them energy efficient. These were the smart folks. And one of the things that's very challenging in these production facilities is their dirty environments, right? You were cutting a lot of wood, cutting glass. These are dirty environments. Dirty environments are very tough on imaging equipment and on copying equipment and printing equipment. They just don't like dust very well. So I'm allowed to come in, and the company I represented before, where I had moved them from Xerox over, had a new rep that had taken over. Good guy. That was their rep now. And they said we both could come in and we would each get an engineering department, one in one factory area and one in the other factory area. And they would evaluate the equipment, and whoever was evaluated as the better equipment would win the opportunity. So I knew a couple things. One is the dirty environment. The other thing was the dirty environment causes misfeeds and jams. So I'm sitting here going, how am I going to do this thing? So inside of office equipment, the equipment that I represented at that point, there was a little thing called reverse roller feeder technology. Now, this is way too deep for all of you, but what it basically does is it makes sure that two sheets of paper can't get fed at the same time. Simple technology. Most equipment today has it. Some of the equipment then had it besides mine. But something you always have to remember is if you don't show it or talk about it, that your company does it, the assumption is you don't do it. You have to portray things that are problem solvers. Otherwise, in your conversations with the prospect, otherwise they don't think you do it. You don't have the capacity to do it. You don't have the staff that does it. Your equipment doesn't do it. So we go in and we're doing the demo, the mano-a-mano demonstration stuff. The other guy's down the hall in another division. And I talk about reverse roller feeder technology. And all these engineers kind of look and go, what's that? And I said this, do any of you use ATM machines? And they all go, yeah. I said, have you ever asked for $100 and gotten 120? And they go, nope. Of course you haven't. I haven't either, still. And I said, the reason you don't is reverse roller feeder technology. And that was actually patented inside this equipment by Ricoh, my current company. And they go, really? What's that mean? And I said, do you guys ever have jams? The system you're printing in the middle of print run just jams up. And they go, all the time. Happens all the time with our current Xerox equipment. They still had Xerox out here. I hadn't gotten and replaced all of it. It takes years and years to do that. And I said, let me show you. So I folded a piece of paper in half, put it in one of the drawers, the bypass where you can see it be fed into the system, right? If you put like a piece of letterhead in there, you can watch it start to feed through the system. And the reverse roller feeder technology actually unfolds the sheet of paper, and out the other end on the finisher comes a full sheet of paper from a half sheet. These engineers were blown away. You got to be kidding me. I said, that type of technology is in all the drawers. Your misfeeds are going to go away. More reliable equipment, built better for this dirty environment. This is the solution. Everything puts dots on paper, but this is going to solve your problem. 2 weeks later, PO, $1 million. Fast forward about 90 days, and I started recruiting the rep from the other company. I bring him over, bring him on my team. He comes in the first day, and I say, hey, we got some paperwork to fill out. And he goes, I'm not signing any paperwork until you show me reverse roller feeder technology. And I started laughing. I go, what? He goes, it's the only reason you won that deal. They loved us over here, and you showed them some magic trick, and your equipment was stronger and better than ours to these engineers. You got to show it to me. So I took him in and showed him the demonstration. He goes, it's the greatest thing ever. He became the best demonstration rep I've ever had on any of my teams. He used to he'd go and buy a tray of cookies at the local grocery store, and he'd slide them behind. There was a little tray that would hold the instruction manuals on Canon equipment, actually, and the manual would slide in this little compartment, and he would put the tray of cookies in there, and he would set an egg timer or a cooking timer for 10 minutes behind the unit, and he'd be showing people the product. And by that 10 minutes in, the product's doing all sorts of cool stuff that they don't have in their current product. And the egg timer would go ding, and he'd go, cookies are done. And he'd pull the cookies out, and people would actually go, it makes cookies too? It was priceless. But what he had learned was differentiation, fix the problems, show what it does to cure an issue. This is how you bring down big deals. This is how you convince people to take a little bit of risk on you. And every deal's not going to have reverse roller feeder technology or cookies are done type capabilities, but don't be scared to get outside your comfort zone, challenge the status quo, show them that you bring resolutions. Focus on how you are a means to grow revenues and solve problems that are holding their company back is the key. Broken equipment holds companies back. If you're a financial institution and you couldn't get printout, what does that mean? Could you not get a cashier's check out for a customer that's trying to close on a house? That's a big impact to somebody. You have to position yourself as the company that disallows those types of things to happen. If you focus on costs and price versus solving problems, you're not going to win because you're going to become commoditized. You got to focus on how I can grow revenue, not just lower their cost. Because that focusing on cost and price, you're a commodity man and someone's always willing to sell it for less than you. And typically when that comes up, when someone says to me, well, they're less expensive than you, my rebuttal to that objection is always the same. No one understands the value of their product and service more than the one trying to sell it. Sounds to me like they know there's no value to you in that equipment or in that service. Can we get back onto value? That's how you handle that. How can you help them grow their business with their customers? Focus there once you get engaged with these monsters, with these big elephants that you're calling on. You're not going to win all of them. You got to have your ass in the car, though. You don't have to drive every deal, but you got to have your butt in the car. And the proverbial car here is involved in talking with them as they're making decisions. Always be appreciative. Always be thankful. Always be humble. Don't be negative on your competition. And we'll continue to talk about this in part 2. So be positive and keep on being awesome. Keep that shit up. Talk next week.